Did you know that cider is just wine but made with apples? So unlike beer, which is made with malted wheat barley, which means that it's not gluten-free, cider is literally just apples, and it's just made using yeast in the fermentation, just like how wine is. So we've put a box together and it's all different ciders from England, and they've all got really cool labels as well. So this one is made in North Herefordshire, and it's a classic table cider, so they've just kept things really, really simple. And it's so tropical. It's a little bit like when you're drinking a really sort of funky, dry champagne, a much more tropical version of it, but it's really, really clean, cuts through. It'd be really nice to have sort of a pre-lunch drink because it's just so cutting, it's so fresh, it feels almost hydrating. And it would be really good with food. That's how dry this one is. It's crisp. So this one is 7% alcohol. And someone was asking me about the sort of correlation between alcohol and sweetness in cider. And it's just the same as wine. So when you make wine, it's grape juice, which is sugar. Then yeast in the fermentation eats sugar and creates alcohol and CO2 from that. So if you let the yeast eat all of the sugar, you'll have no sweetness inside. That'll be very, very dry, and you'll have a lot of alcohol. If you stop that fermentation partway through, you'll have a little bit of sugar left in there, so it'll still be a little bit sweet, and you won't have as much alcohol because not as much of that sugar has been converted into alcohol. So this one's 7%, which is quite high, especially compared to some of them that we've got here. We've got a whole mixture. And that's what cider is. It's exactly that same range of wine. It goes from dry all the way to medium sweet and sweet. And cider's exactly the same. So this first one is very dry. It's allowed all of that yeast to eat all of the sugar. It's all gone and it's all become alcohol. So that's why it's 7%, super, super dry. So when you're tasting different ciders, you can usually tell how sweet it's going to be based on that ABV percentage. So this one's 7%. Gosh, it just smells wonderful, that one. So, so nice. Lightly sparkling, really, really lovely. The next one is a little bit more different. So it's by Pilton, and they got this really great cider guy. He's called Martin Goodwood Sharman, and he just knows everything about cider. But he was the guest blender for this one. And what was really fun is when they sent it out to everyone, it was completely covered in sort of black paper packaging, twisted up so it looked like a gift and a bit of a mystery. And they were like, please don't show the label on social media or on any photos or in any press until we release it on our Instagram. So they did an Instagram live, and on the front of their bottle they've got a little haiku, and I think they've read the haiku out on their Instagram live. I won't read it out, it's not a spoken word thing, but my favourite line, it goes, your shoulders beg for sunburn, cheap wine in the fridge door. It's just very fun. I really like it. That's my kind of haiku. I'm not really into poetry. Ooh. So this one, again, fizzy. And what's really nice is because apart from this one, which we'll have in a minute, they're all bottle caps. So it means that it's really easy to sort of take to the park, and you don't really need a bottle opener or anything. Ooh, so this one's much deeper in colour. Ooh. So this one's 5.5% ABV. So it's a little bit lower in alcohol than the last. Oh. Ooh, the last one was tropical, funky, bready. This one is sort of like burnt butter and honey. Oh, that smells lovely. It looks golden and it smells golden as well. Oh, that is wonderful. So this one's from Somerset, and it's got such a light fizz in it. The last one was much fizzier. This one's really, really subtle fizz. You know when you have those really expensive fancy champagnes and the bubbles are just so, so small? That's really nice. So the way that they make this one is by a process called keeving, and keeving is the sort of natural way how to make cider. And keeving is when you don't use anything in cider. It's literally just apples. No sugar, no water, nothing. It's just apples. And there's a natural formation of a pectin gel. So when you have it in the tank, you've just got the apples in there, and then a pectin gel naturally forms and sits on top of the cider. So it keeps out any air in contact from the rest of the barrel. and it traps in the nitrogen inside the cider when it's fermenting. It's sort of releasing nitrogen, it traps it inside there, and that means that it's completely starved. There's no extra nutrients going in there. It just has to, it's like an airtight container basically because of that gel cell on top. So it means that the fermentation stops itself naturally, so you don't have to intervene in any way. It stops itself, it doesn't have any more nutrients, so it can't carry on eating the sugar. So it leaves some natural sugars inside there and doesn't create as much alcohol. So that's why it's 5.5%. And the first one was really dry. This one's still it's quite dry still. I wouldn't say it's a sweet one. It's described as medium sweet, but it's not like one of those ciders where you taste it and think, takes the skin off your teeth. Yeah, it does have a little bit of sweetness in a really nice way. It's so balanced. It's just like talking about wine. It's when you have so much acidity. My mouth is watering loads. Or when you have loads of acidity and a little bit of sweetness, it balances out so well you almost don't notice that sweetness. This is also made with bacchus grapes. So bacchus is a wine grape used to make wine, and they leave the bacchus grape skins in there for a few months. So it's soaked in with the cider and it adds this little bit of extra edge to it. It's like when you have skin contact wine, you've got a bit more edge to the wine. It's doing that but with the cider, so it feels quite savoury at the same time as sweet. So it's a really nice balance with that one. And the next two. So we've got two Wilding ones here. This first one is dry ancestral method. And you'll know the name ancestral method because people always talk about ancestral method. God, it scares me every time. People always talk about, oh, this one's really fizzing away. People always talk about ancestral method with wine, because ancestral method is, oh, look at that bubble formed on top. Ancestral method is the old way to make a sparkling wine. People always talk about, you get a lot of natural sparkling wines that are made, and it says ancestral method. And it basically means it's not made in the same way as things like Prosecco and Champagne. They go through two fermentations. That's the reason they go through two fermentations is the first fermentation, yeast eats up the sugar and creates alcohol and creates CO2, but you just let the CO2 drift off into the atmosphere. Then the second fermentation, they put a bit more sugar in it again, or like an eau de vie, which is when you have, it's a little bit extra wine that has that natural sugar in. And you let it ferment again, but this time you keep it in a sealed tank, and then that CO2 gets trapped in. It's like a soda stream, it pushes that sort of fizz back into it. If you keep it sealed with CO2, it makes it fizzy. Ancestral method is the simpler way of doing it. So instead of having those two fermentations, you just have one, and it's just happening inside the bottle. So they put it into this bottle when it still has a little bit of sugar inside there. And so the yeast is still alive and it's still eating away at that sugar and making it just a little bit fizzy by releasing that CO2 and making a bit more alcohol and taking a bit of sugar away. So this one is 6.4% ABV. When they put it into this bottle, it probably would have been lower, but they allowed it to sort of carry on fermenting, so it's ancestral method, it's making it fizz. Can you see that bit floating on top as well? It's like when you have a beer and you leave it for too long, and it's sort of gathered the foam on the inside. That's really fun to look at. Ooh. Ooh, that one reminds me of beer a little bit. Feels really dry, and again, we know it's going to be dry because it's quite high ABV, alcohol percentage. It feels a bit beery. It feels really sort of cutting. It feels quite chunky. It feels really full-bodied, that one. And I've never really talked about full body and light body with cider before because I'm a winer. I don't really do cider usually, but God, I love these. They're so good. That one's really chunky. This one, so they're both Wilding, but this one's the Babouche. And because I'm still quite new to cider, it's really fun talking about, you always know about grape varieties and it's like a blend of Sauvignon, it's a blend of Chardonnay. This is a blend of different apple varieties, which is really fun. So there's Dabinett, Browns, Chisel Jersey, and the three apple varieties all add a different something inside there. So Dabinett, one of them, adds this sort of fleshy orange flavour. It's a little bit like, it is a little bit orangey. It's a little bit like burnt orange, like, you know, when you have something Seville orange flavoured. It feels like that, it feels rounded. Citrusy. This one's Run Deep. It's by Wilding again, and it says still dry, bittersweet cider. I mean, the last one was very sort of that like bittersweet, Negroni, bitter orange. So I wonder what this one's like. Similar colour to the last one, not fizzy. I mean, we can tell it's not fizzy because it didn't have that cap on top. But God, I love the yellow on top of this. It looks so, so nice. Ooh, so apparently this one is bone dry. Ooh, yeah, that is bone dry. And you can tell it is 6.9 ABV again. Higher alcohol, lower in sugar. So this one is from, it's so much like wine because they're from 30-year-old apple trees, and it's exactly the same way that you talk about grapes. You talk about how old the tree is because it's going to start producing different quality fruit. The older it is, the fewer apples it'll produce, and then they're sort of more delicious apples and more concentrated flavours. That one's really dry. It's got a blend again of lots of different apples, but it still tastes orangey in a way, that one. Really, really interesting. And what else they do with it is they age it inside stainless steel, and then they put that into old oak barrels, and those are oak barrels that were used to make red wine. So it tastes a bit like orange wine. It's really bizarre, that one, but I really like it. And then the next two that we have are Oliver's Fine Cider. So these two are both made by this guy called Oliver, and his family have had a farm in Herefordshire for generations, and his granddad used to make cider, and then when they went to machine farming rather than hand farming, his grandfather went, oh, we don't need to make cider anymore because you're not as thirsty when you're machine harvesting because you sort of sat in the tractor, so it's so much easier. So he stopped making cider. All the things he used to make cider, all the machinery, all the equipment that he had, he just either sold or it came into disrepair. So Oliver started from scratch again, but in exactly the same place that his family's been making cider for generations. So this one is Dabinett apples, and we already talked about Dabinett apples with this one, and they had that orangey flavour again, which was really delicious. So this one is fizzy. It's a 9.3% ABV, which is absolutely huge, so we're going to assume that this one is super, super dry again. Ooh, this one tastes a bit floral, or smells floral. Oh, that is really nice. Clean, bone dry, absolutely no sweetness on there, but a little bit easier going than these two Wilding ones. It's got a little bit of floral character with it as well. So the last one is by Oliver's again, and this one is a Keeved Perry. So when we talked about keeving earlier, it's exactly the same, but this time made with pears. So they've done it a little bit different. When they were making this, when they were keeving it, they stopped the process even earlier, so the fermentation was stopped. Less alcohol was created and more sugar is left inside there. So this one is the lowest in alcohol. It's only 3.3%, which is tiny. It's basically for kids, this one. Oh, oh yeah, that is sweet. That's the one that tastes most like cider, that one. Really, really sweet, really appley, sort of peachy as well, but loads and loads of acidity. Oh, that's really nice, that one. That's a nice one to finish with as well. Really good. But I hope you enjoy all the ciders, and the perry as well, sorry. Cider and perry. But let us know which one your favourite one is.